This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, April 23rd. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at our VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what is going on, and we appreciate your staying with us on Africa 54. The global coronavirus pandemic is quickly becoming a human rights crisis. That's according to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He called on governments Thursday to ensure healthcare is available and accessible to all people, that economic aid packages help those most affected, and that everyone has the ability to obtain food, water, and housing. World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says COVID-19 will be with the global community a long time and, quote, "Make no mistake, we have a long way to go." He says most countries are still in the early stages of their epidemics, and some that were affected early in the pandemic are now starting to see a resurgence in cases. Worldwide, there are now more than 2.6 million cases of the coronavirus, and at least 184,000 people have died, according to the latest Reuters data. Now to Africa, where help to fight the coronavirus is on the way to the Democratic Republic of Congo. The International Monetary Fund says it has approved $363 million for Congo to battle the disease. South Africa says it's considering flexible restrictions on economic activity once it moves past a national coronavirus lockdown. Northern Nigeria governors say they will close disputed Islamic schools due to concerns over COVID-19. Students will have to be evacuated to their parent states of origin. And Sudanese officials say almost all of its 140 coronavirus cases, including 13 deaths, have occurred in Khartoum, which is under a 3-week lockdown. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is defending President Donald Trump's decision to pause U.S. funding to the World Health Organization for 60 to 90 days. Pompeo says WHO officials still are not publicly calling out China for failing to share vital information about the origins of the coronavirus. VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has our story.
As the coronavirus continues to take a toll on people around the world, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is blasting China's ruling Communist Party, the CCP, for withholding information on the deadly virus, and criticizing the World Health Organization for failing to call out Beijing.
Even after the CCP did notify the WHO of the coronavirus outbreak, China didn't share all of the information it had. Instead, it covered up how dangerous the disease is. It didn't report sustained human-to-human transmission for a month until it was in every province inside of China. It censored those who tried to warn the world. It ordered a halt to testing of new samples, and it destroyed existing samples.
The U.S. is the largest single donor to the WHO, but global health experts say now is not the time to withhold funds to the organization.
Personally, I cannot think of anything more bizarre and more harmful than freezing funding to the World Health Organization during this pandemic. It does not make any sense whatsoever.
Yemi pointed out that the WHO has been providing scientific guidance to nations across the world, as well as distributing COVID-19 testing kits and protective equipment. Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. is leading the global fight against the virus, providing $775 million to 100 countries.
The United States is the most generous nation on the planet, has been for the past 3 years, will continue to be this year.
The World Health Organization denies it has been too lenient on China and says now is not the time to cut off funding. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order suspending for 60 days the issuance of permanent residency status, also known as green cards. The president described it as an effort to protect American workers' jobs during the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. While Trump says the order is powerful, as White House correspondent Gebreyesus reports, the action contains a wide series of exceptions and may only affect a small number of people.
More details have emerged on President Donald Trump's plan to enact a 60-day suspension effective April 24th for those seeking permanent residency, also known as a green card.
We want Americans to have the jobs. We want Americans to have the health care. We want to take care of our citizens first. We have to. It's a very powerful order. It's for 60 days. At the end of 60 days, or maybe even during 60 days, I'll extend it or not, and I'll maybe change it. I might modify it.
The executive order affects certain categories of green card applicants who are outside of the U.S. and does not apply to individuals already in the country seeking to adjust their immigration status. Exceptions include spouses and children of Americans, military families, wealthy investors or EB-5 category, and current green card holders outside of the country, as well as temporary guest workers such as those who work seasonally on farms. In effect, the ban would only pertain to a small group of people, despite Trump describing it as powerful.
It's powerful in that it is new, and however, I would describe it as rather narrow and temporary. So you're talking in the 300,000 number of people or even less that this would apply to.
There is also an exception for healthcare professionals entering to combat the pandemic and their families. Trump signed the order Wednesday afternoon, but has tweeted about it since Monday. The broad language in the tweet about suspending immigration came as a surprise and ignited confusion. Immigration attorney Hassan Ahmad.
Almost immediately, the phone calls and the emails and the text messages started coming in from clients all across the board, people that were mid-process, applying for green cards inside the United States, people stuck still outside the United States, people who were waiting for their interviews, and today, people who actually already have their green cards filing for citizenship. Even they're wondering whether this is going to affect them.
It's unclear how much impact this order would have on the ground, since much of the U.S. immigration system already has stopped due to the pandemic, with almost all visa processing indefinitely suspended for weeks. Gebreyesus, VOA News at the White House.
Several countries, including Germany and South Korea, and a number of U.S. states are easing their coronavirus lockdown restrictions this week. But experts caution that a number of conditions need to be in place before people leave their homes and return to public places. VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
After 4 weeks of a strict lockdown to curb the spread of the coronavirus, Germany eased some of its restrictive measures, allowing some shops to reopen this week in cities such as Cologne and Frankfurt. Across the Atlantic in the U.S., there have been protests at state capitals against individual state lockdowns by groups largely supportive of President Trump. But in Florida, some beaches have reopened. And in the state of Georgia, fitness clubs and hair salons will start opening their doors later this week. Health experts warn that Germany and South Korea have widespread testing, decreasing hospitalizations, and lowering death rates per capita that allow for easing of the lockdown. The U.S., now the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic, is not there yet.
We need to expand testing capacity so that basically what the administration promised, everyone who wants a test can get a test. And when we think about that, what that data would then show us is if we started to see peaks in new transmissions, we would catch that more quickly. Right now, we are only testing people with symptoms, and we know that people begin to transmit prior to symptoms.
You would hope even a reduction over a 14-day period. And then you would have to make sure that the hospitals are capable of taking care of those patients.
In New York City and other parts of the U.S., healthcare workers are protesting the lack of personal protective equipment to keep them safe as they work to save others.
In many settings, in many hospitals, we've seen astoundingly high rates of infection amongst health workers. That is a catastrophe. I would argue that's a moral disgrace.
Experts caution that easing lockdown restrictions will be a delicate dance, and that restrictions may need to be reimposed if coronavirus cases spike again. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Africans in Guangzhou, China, say they are facing mistreatment from authorities who suspect them of carrying the coronavirus. VOA Salem Solomon has this report drawn from a series of reports compiled by VOA journalists from across the Africa division.
This footage shows a Congolese student in Guangzhou pleading for permission to leave his apartment. Taken secretly, this is one of many videos provided to VOA to show the plight of Africans in China amid the coronavirus. Speaking in Mandarin, he tells a Chinese worker that he's been home for 2 months and has no symptoms of the virus. The worker tells him he must stay inside for 14 more days.
But I didn't travel to Africa.
It is our job. We need to implement this because the pandemic situation is pretty critical in Africa.
African residents like the Congolese man say they are being singled out for additional testing, quarantine, and in some cases are being evicted from their homes. A businessman originally from Burundi is another man who spoke to VOA. He has lived in China for 12 years and said Chinese medical personnel backed by security forces are targeting Africans. They are knocking on doors and demanding that residents take a nucleic acid test and submit to quarantine for 14 days.
Now we as an African wake up in the morning and these are people standing on your door that say you have to undergo this test. So it was a confusing situation because some of us were thinking that, oh, now they want to put the virus in us, not just checking us.
Advocates say Africans are being denied basic rights. But Chinese authorities insist Africans are not being singled out.
All foreigners in China are treated equally, and China opposes any differentiated approach targeting specific groups of people. China and Africa have always been good friends, partners, and brothers.
Guangzhou has the largest population of Africans in China, with estimates ranging between 100,000 and 200,000. On April 7, Chinese authorities announced that there were 16 new coronavirus cases among African residents, including some in the area of the city known as Little Africa. Since that time, African residents say they have been targeted. A Kenyan immigrant living in Guangzhou told VOA that it was once common to see groups of Africans on the street, but now there are almost none.
You will not see any black person on the market. You will not see any black person in the shop. You only see the black person only loitering around, knowing not what to do because we have been crying and nobody is hearing our help.
But a Somali student in Guangzhou said he is hopeful things are getting better and has received outreach from local authorities.
The local authority, they're trying to get solution. They get rid of this kind of discrimination. They are telling us we don't tolerate any color. We don't discriminate anybody. We equally welcome all the foreigners in here, and they are trying to make the meeting every like morning. I have been attending that kind of meeting. I'm feeling a hope to be changing everything and become normal as before.
Salem Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, coronavirus threatens to shutter small businesses owned by immigrants in New York. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to Africa 54. Italy has the second largest number of reported deaths after the United States from COVID-19. And as the country enters its 7th week of lockdown, VOA Saqib Al-Islam talks to two Americans who have made Rome their home.
This lone voice of an opera singer is the only sign of a once bustling city. American Annie Ogile lives in the historic district of Rome.
I've made a friend in quarantine, and so he sings, and I take videos of him, and I post it on my social media.
Before the coronavirus hit, Ogile ran a small business named Scooter Roma, which provides Vespa tours in Rome. She has been emotionally and financially drained by Rome's lockdown, which is extended until at least May 3rd.
I really thrive with being with people, professionally and also personally. So that has been a big challenge for me. I miss having interaction with people. I haven't fallen for all this Zoom and video stuff because for me, I just want the real thing.
She has not seen any of her friends for nearly 2 months, including fellow American Livia Hengel, who is just a few blocks away. Neither women can go more than 200 meters outside of their homes without a signed legal document which explains why they are leaving their house.
Apart from the cashier at the grocery store and, the wine delivery guy, I haven't seen any humans.
But unlike Annie, Livia, a travel writer from state of Virginia, likes the virtual connections.
It's a strange situation, but obviously we have the internet. So a lot of Skype chats and Zoom chats, of course.
Despite being away from their families in the United States and seeing their tourism-dependent work dwindle, both Ogile and Hengel have lived in Rome for more than a decade and are hopeful that Italian city streets will bustle with tourists again.
We have to distance ourselves so we can come together. It's not going to be forever. We will be able to do it.
I think the Italian reaction has been quite resilient and, ironic in some ways, and trying to, handle the situation with some humor and just with a lot of heart, because it's the only thing you can do.
In March, the Italian government gave 600 euros to individuals and businesses and announced another stimulus package in April to prop up businesses that have been hit hard by the coronavirus lockdown. Saqib Al-Islam, VOA News.
South Africa's pharmacists are often overlooked as frontline health workers in the fight against Africa's worst outbreak of the coronavirus, despite frequently being the first in contact with those showing symptoms. In the rural town of Mokopane, in South Africa's northern Limpopo province, pharmacist Bronwyn van Heerden and her colleagues provide medicine to hundreds of patients daily. Reporter Marise de Klerk brings us Van Heerden's story, told in her own words.
We've tried as far as possible to keep everybody safe. We're working in different teams, rotating on a weekly basis, with only 2 pharmacies running, but we still seem to get an explosion of patients on a daily basis. Trying to keep all the staff calm, as every sneeze that comes into the door and every cough is a potential risk for all of us. We've put up perspex along with the danger tape between us and the patients. We've put stickers on the floor so that people can see where they must stand. But everybody is still scared. Every time somebody coughs in the pharmacy, everybody looks around and everybody is oblivious of what's going on outside. The many people that are standing queuing, waiting to come into the pharmacy, it's not diminishing. People are there all day long, from morning to night. Hopefully this will end, and hopefully people will start realizing the dangers and keep to their quarantines, keep out of the public and keep at home to stay and keep everybody else safe.
With more Americans cooking at home during the COVID-19 pandemic, grocery stores are facing higher consumer demand for food and other products precisely when the nation's supply chain is being strained. VOA's Ken Faribault reports from the state of Wisconsin, America's dairy capital, that bare store shelves don't necessarily mean the nation is running out of food.
On Tina Hinchley's dairy farm outside Cambridge, Wisconsin, COVID-19 hasn't stopped the daily routine of milking her cows.
There is a huge demand.
Historically, about 90% of the milk Hinchley and her family produces supplies Wisconsin's famous cheese industry, which, like almost everything in American life, has been upended by efforts to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
When the restaurants and the schools and the universities had to close down because of this pandemic, 70% of the milk that was being made into cheese ended up halting production.
Hinchley says it takes time for the food industry to adjust output to meet sudden shifts in consumer behavior, like a surge in demand for cheese portioned and packaged for supermarkets.
It's going to take time before there's a conversion from a 40-pound block of cheese into string cheese, or taking the little single-serving pats of butter and making it into more retail selections for the consumer.
Seldom does a consumer go to a grocery store and want to buy a 5-pound bag of shredded cheese. They want it maybe 1 pound at a time. And you can't just put 1-pound bags through a 5-pound line. Not possible. You have to have different piece of equipment set up differently.
Mark Stevenson is the Director of Dairy Policy Analysis at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
We've had an industry that's had to shuffle a great deal to move product from where it was produced before to where it needs to be today.
Which is why some items may be unavailable, a problem Stevenson sees as temporary.
Mostly the amount of food that's been produced before is being produced now and is generally available to consumers.
Well, I think there's plenty of goods on farms.
Illinois farmer Brian Duncan, who spoke to VOA via Skype, says he has enough hogs to keep pork processors near him busy. A COVID-19 outbreak forced the closure of a South Dakota processing plant that handles about 5% of America's pork output. Even with meat processors cutting or suspending operations, Duncan doesn't foresee long-term shortages of meat products.
So I would still be confident suppliers or packers can keep things going well enough to keep the grocery stores stocked, and any disruptions are local in nature and short-term disruptions in just the ability to get the product through the system and into the grocery store.
The product is there, it's the packaging that's the hiccup right now. This is the bump in the chain.
If anything, Tina Hinchley says her dairy operation is producing too much at this point. While she isn't disposing of any milk, she and other dairy farmers across the country may have to reduce their herds to prevent flooding the marketplace with milk that can't be processed.
But we are learning a new way of doing things. Things are not the same as what they were just a month ago.
Before COVID-19, Americans spent more money eating out than eating in. Now, the numbers are reversed, and food suppliers are struggling to adjust. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Cambridge, Wisconsin.
Doctors at the University of California, San Francisco this week began testing residents in the coastal town of Bolinas for both COVID-19 and antibodies to the deadly virus. VOA's Mariama Diallo tells us why the researchers chose such a small town for their study.
One by one, volunteers directed residents to drive into Mesa Park, where the University of California, San Francisco has 4 testing sites set up for nasal swabs and finger pricks. The town's relative isolation can provide a useful case for learning how the disease spreads, says university professor Dr. Einar Sawyer.
There's no road that runs through our town, so we're a fairly isolated, rural, and stable ecosystem right now for the last several weeks. So it'll be very interesting to see the footprint of the virus.
But this is not an isolated study. In addition to Bolinas, another study is also planned in a more urban area.
The Mission District of San Francisco, where it's very densely populated, people are living very close to each other, and it's very connected. So by sort of bookending the different types of communities that we're evaluating within a very short period of time, it's all happening within a week, we hope to be able to extrapolate much more to different places throughout Northern California.
The goal is to test as many people as they can, so they've made the testing free. Dr. Sawyer says the researchers hope they'll get answers to a treasure trove of questions.
Are the early antibodies in a person who's still infected? Are the late antibodies someone who's not infected, but do they have immunity? We don't really know that. And if they do, how long does it last?
In addition to the 1,600 residents in Bolinas, the researchers aim to test people who work in the town but live elsewhere, possibly boosting the total number of people tested to 2,000. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
In our business segment, as measures locking down New York State to prevent the spread of the coronavirus continue, non-essential services and businesses that have been shut down are feeling the impact. In New York City in particular, small businesses owned by immigrants are in danger of going bankrupt because of the lack of customers. Anshuman Apte reports.
The business was good before. Now, as you can see, nobody is coming.
You can say that we are talking, but in reality, we could be crying.
If this continues, it will be very difficult to survive here.
Fear and grief has gripped the business community along Coney Island Avenue in Brooklyn, an area informally known as Little Pakistan. The reason for this is the executive order issued by New York's Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo that restricts normal business activity to curb the spread of the coronavirus. It calls on New Yorkers to stay home and mandates all non-essential businesses to remain closed until further notice.
The restrictions started taking effect from, say, March 16th, but the situation started deteriorating even before that.
We used to see a lot of business during this time of the year. It's all gone now.
While the lockdown hasn't affected grocery stores as much, their sales have gone down too.
People have already stocked all essentials, like flour, rice, sugar, and tea. Now people just come for flour or rice, that's all. They have stockpiled other stuff already.
Restaurants are open, but can only deliver food.
People are so scared of the coronavirus that they are coming out less often, even for food takeouts. Because of this, I've lost 75% of my business.
The Coney Island Avenue area business owners say that if the lockdown continues much longer, there is a chance that they might be forced to close their businesses.
Employees, rent, electricity, insurance, all these bills are stacking up on us.
If the customers don't come, then I will be forced to shut my store.
To provide some relief, New York State is implementing federal programs aimed at helping small businesses with loans and grants to retain their employees. Meanwhile, Governor Cuomo has indicated he will look for ways to gradually relax restrictions in some areas of the economy once the virus threat is under control. Anshuman Apte, VOA News, New York City.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.